I'm Danielle, 35, a dedicated high school art teacher in Portland. For 8 years, I believed my marriage to Anthony, a financial advisor, was solid. My younger sister, Sophia, was always someone I looked up to, and we shared everything. But during our annual family gathering at the lake house, I discovered something in the storage room that would shatter everything I thought I knew about them both. Looking back, the signs were there for months. I just refused to see them. If you're watching this, where are you from? Like and subscribe for more stories about betrayal and finding your strength again. My life in Portland with Anthony seemed picture perfect on the surface. We lived in a modern two-story home in a quiet neighborhood, complete with the white picket fence I had always dreamed about as a little girl. Anthony made good money as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm downtown, and I loved my job teaching art to high schoolers. Creating that spark of creativity in teenagers was something that filled my heart with purpose every day. Anthony and I met through mutual friends at a charity auction 8 years ago. He was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in my passion for art, even though he admitted he could barely draw a stick figure. We dated for 2 years before he proposed during a weekend trip to the coast. The wedding was everything I had imagined, intimate yet beautiful, with Sophia standing proudly beside me as my maid of honor. For the first 5 years, our marriage was strong. We complemented each other well. His analytical mind balanced my creative spirit. We traveled during summers when school was out, explored new restaurants, and spent quiet evenings talking about our dreams. But the last 3 years, something had shifted. Anthony worked later, seemed distracted, and our conversations became superficial. The intimacy that had once been so natural between us felt forced. I chalked it up to the natural evolution of a long-term relationship, the honeymoon phase fading into comfortable companionship. My sister Sophia was 32, 3 years younger than me, but always seeming light years ahead in confidence and success. With her sleek dark hair and confident stride, she commanded attention in any room. As the marketing executive for a major sportswear company, she traveled frequently and lived a glamorous life that contrasted with my more settled existence. Her husband, James, was a pharmaceutical sales representative, handsome in a conventional way with his sandy blonde hair and easy smile. They had been married for 5 years but had decided to focus on their careers before starting a family. Growing up, Sophia and I had been inseparable despite our different personalities. I was the cautious, artistic one while she was bold and outspoken. She defended me from playground bullies, and I helped her with school projects. As adults, we remained close, meeting for coffee every Sunday and calling each other during the week to catch up. At least that was our routine until recently, when Sophia's calls became less frequent and our Sunday coffee dates were increasingly canceled due to work commitments. The lake house had been in our family for generations. Our parents had left it jointly to Sophia and me when they retired to Arizona 3 years ago. The annual summer gathering was a tradition that brought together our extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, for a week of boating, barbecues, and board games. This year there would be 12 of us in total, including our parents flying in from Scottsdale. I had been looking forward to the gathering as a chance to reconnect with Anthony. Maybe away from work pressures, we could rekindle what had been missing lately. But as the date approached, I noticed Anthony seemed unusually anxious about the trip. He packed and repacked his suitcase, spent extra time choosing outfits, and checked his phone constantly. When I asked if everything was okay, he brushed it off as stress about leaving work during a busy period. Looking back, there had been other signs too. At Christmas dinner last year, I caught Anthony watching Sophia as she told a story, his eyes lingering too long on her face. During my birthday celebration at a restaurant 2 months ago, they had both disappeared to get something from the car for nearly 20 minutes. Each incident seemed innocent enough on its own, but together they formed a pattern I had been subconsciously avoiding. As we drove to the lake house that Friday morning, Anthony was unusually quiet, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I tried to make conversation, pointing out the beautiful summer scenery, but his responses were distracted and brief. A sense of dread began to pool in my stomach, like dark water rising slowly around my feet. The first hints of trouble appeared within hours of arriving at the lake house. Anthony was meticulously arranging his clothes in the dresser when his phone chimed with a text. He snatched it up with unusual urgency, his expression shifting from tense to relieved as he read the message. When I asked who it was from, he muttered something about a client before quickly changing the subject. Later that afternoon, as I unpacked our toiletries in the bathroom, I noticed Anthony had brought cologne he rarely used anymore, an expensive brand I had given him for our anniversary 3 years ago. He'd also packed his newest clothes and had even gotten a fresh haircut the day before we left. This level of preparation seemed excessive for a casual family gathering at a lake house. My parents arrived first, bringing homemade cookies and excited chatter about their retirement community. Next came my cousin Rachel with her husband and 2 children, followed by my uncle David and his new girlfriend. We were all settled in and preparing dinner when Sophia and James finally arrived nearly 3 hours later than expected. "Sorry we're late," Sophia announced, breezing into the kitchen with designer sunglasses pushed up on her head. The meeting with the European distributors ran long, and then traffic was a nightmare. She hugged our mother, then me, her expensive perfume lingering in the air. James followed behind with their luggage, giving everyone warm greetings. As he shook Anthony's hand, I noticed a momentary tension between them, a slightly too firm handshake, a flicker of something unreadable in James's eyes. During dinner on the sprawling deck overlooking the lake, I observed Anthony and Sophia carefully. Though they sat on opposite sides of the table, they seemed hyper-aware of each other. When Anthony spoke, Sophia would subtly adjust her posture to face him. When Sophia laughed at someone's joke, Anthony's eyes would immediately find her. Once, when passing the salad bowl, their fingers brushed, and both withdrew their hands as if burned. These observations triggered memories of earlier incidents that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now felt weighted with new meaning. 3 months ago, I had borrowed Anthony's laptop to order art supplies when a text notification appeared on the screen. It was from Sophia. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place." When I asked Anthony about it later, he said they were meeting for lunch to plan my surprise birthday party. Then there were Anthony's business trips that mysteriously aligned with Sophia's marketing conferences. In the past 6 months, they had both been in Chicago, Boston, and San Diego during the same weeks. Anthony had always returned from these trips distracted and emotionally distant, claiming exhaustion from intense work sessions. The late-night phone calls had started about 4 months ago. I'd wake at midnight or later to find Anthony's side of the bed empty, then hear his hushed voice from the home office or back porch. Once I caught the tail end of a conversation. I know. This isn't sustainable. We need to figure something out." When I asked who he was talking to at such a late hour, he claimed it was a colleague in the Asian markets dealing with a crisis. His behavior toward me had shifted subtly but unmistakably. The affectionate touches as he passed me in the kitchen had disappeared. Our conversations remained pleasant but lacked depth, as if he was carefully maintaining a facade. Intimacy became increasingly rare and felt mechanical when it did occur. When I tried to discuss these changes, Anthony would deflect, blaming work stress or suggest I was being oversensitive. That evening at the lake house, as everyone settled into board games and conversation, I slipped away to call my friend Lisa. Finding a quiet spot on the back porch, I confided my growing concerns. "I feel like I'm going crazy," I whispered into the phone. "Am I imagining things? Am I just paranoid?" Lisa's voice was gentle but firm. "Trust your instincts, Danielle. You're one of the most level-headed people I know. If something feels off, it probably is." "But this is Sophia we're talking about," I countered. "My sister. And Anthony. We've been together for 10 years. "Which is why this is so hard," Lisa replied. "But think about it. Hasn't your relationship with Sophia changed too? How often do you actually see each other one-on-one anymore?" Her question hit me like a physical blow. Our weekly coffee dates had dwindled to monthly, then sporadically. Sophia always had plausible excuses: work deadlines, travel, social obligations. But she never suggested alternative times to meet. "Just watch them tomorrow," Lisa advised. "Pay attention to how they interact, especially when they think no one is looking." As I ended the call and rejoined the family gathering, I found Anthony and Sophia sitting next to each other on the couch, a careful foot of space between them. But their animated conversation stopped abruptly when I entered the room, replaced by overly casual inquiries about my phone call. The knot of dread in my stomach tightened. That night, Anthony and I lay in bed without touching a valley of cold sheets between us. As I stared at the ceiling, listening to the lapping of lake water against the shore through the open window, I steeled myself for what tomorrow might reveal. Saturday at the lake house dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect summer day that normally would have filled me with joy. By mid-morning, the entire family had gathered on the dock and lawn. My father and uncle were preparing the pontoon boat for an afternoon cruise. My mother and cousins were setting up a picnic area complete with a volleyball net for the kids. Anthony volunteered to handle the grill for lunch, expertly flipping burgers while chatting with James about the stock market. Sophia lounged in a deck chair nearby, her long legs stretched out in the sun, occasionally offering opinions on their financial discussion. Everything appeared normal, wholesome even, just a family enjoying their annual gathering. Yet I couldn't shake the vigilance Lisa had encouraged, noticing how Anthony's eyes would drift to Sophia when he thought no one was watching, how she would find reasons to walk past the grill and briefly touch his shoulder in a way that seemed too familiar. After lunch, people dispersed for afternoon activities. My parents and Uncle David took the younger cousins out on the boat. Rachel and her husband decided to hike a nearby trail. I offered to clean up from lunch, waving everyone off to enjoy their free time. James mentioned something about taking a nap to recover from their late arrival the previous night and headed upstairs. As I loaded the dishwasher, I realized I hadn't seen Anthony or Sophia for at least 30 minutes. Their absence occurring simultaneously sent a wave of unease through me. After finishing in the kitchen, I walked through the house, checking the various rooms and porch areas, finding no sign of either of them. I tried to dismiss my growing suspicion. Perhaps Anthony had gone for a walk by the lake. Maybe Sophia was on a work call in the guest room. There were innocent explanations, surely. But Lisa's words echoed in my mind, "Trust your instincts." Remembering that I needed supplies for the dinner I had planned to prepare later, I headed toward the basement storage room, where we kept extra paper goods, serving dishes and pantry overflow. The lake house was old, built in the 1960s by my grandfather, with a sprawling main floor and a large partially finished basement. The storage room was located at the far end of the basement, past the recreation area, with its vintage ping-pong table and well-worn couch. As I descended the wooden stairs, the temperature dropped noticeably. The basement was always cooler, a relief from the summer heat, but requiring a light sweater even in August. My footsteps echoed on the concrete floor as I passed the recreation area and continued down the dimly lit hallway toward the storage room. When I was about 10 feet away, I heard it. Hushed voices, coming from behind the storage room door, which was pulled nearly closed, just a crack of light visible along its edge. My heart began to race, blood pounding in my ears so loudly, I worried it would drown out what they were saying. I slowed my approach, careful to keep my footsteps silent on the concrete floor. "We can't keep doing this," a female voice whispered urgently. Sophia's voice. "It's too risky with everyone here." "I know," came the reply. Anthony's voice pitched low and intimate in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in months. "But I needed to see you alone. Do you know how hard it is pretending all the time?" There was a rustling sound, then a soft sigh. "We need to figure this out soon. I hate lying to James. And Danielle? God, she doesn't deserve this." My hand trembled as I reached for the door handle. Part of me wanted to turn around, go back upstairs and pretend I hadn't heard anything. Continue living in blissful denial. But another part, the part that had been accumulating evidence for months, needed to see the truth with my own eyes. I pushed the door open. The storage room was dimly lit by a single overhead bulb, illuminating shelves of holiday decorations, camping equipment, and household supplies. And there, between the shelves and an old dresser used for storing tablecloths, stood Anthony and Sophia, locked in an intimate embrace. His hands were tangled in her hair, her arms wrapped around his waist, their foreheads touching as they spoke in those hushed, urgent tones. They didn't notice me immediately. For 3 eternal seconds, I stood frozen in the doorway, witnessing this tableau of betrayal. Then the door hinges creaked, and they sprung apart like startled animals, their expressions morphing from secret intimacy to shock and horror. "Danielle!" Anthony gasped, his face draining of color. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God!" My vision narrowed to a tunnel, my extremities going numb as blood rushed to my core. The storage room seemed to tilt and spin around me. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself, my knuckles white with the effort. "Danny, this isn't... I can explain." Sophia started taking a step toward me, her hand outstretched. Anthony moved forward too. "Honey, please, it's not what you think." But their disheveled appearance told the truth their words tried to deny. Anthony's shirt was partially untucked, his hair mussed where Sophia's hands had been moments before. Sophia's lipstick was smudged, her blouse buttons misaligned. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed, strangling any words before they could form. The betrayal was too enormous, too incomprehensible to process in that moment. My husband and my sister, the 2 people I trusted most in the world. Without conscious thought, I stepped backward out of the doorway. Something primitive and self-protective took over, guiding my actions when rational thought failed. I pulled the heavy wooden door closed in front of me, watching their expressions change from shock to alarm as they realized what I was doing. The storage room door was old, like everything in the lake house, with a heavy brass key that remained in the lock. In one fluid motion, I turned the key, the metallic click of the mechanism sliding into place, oddly satisfying amid the chaos of emotions. "Danielle, what are you doing? Open the door." Anthony's voice came through the thick wood, followed by the sound of his palm slapping against it. Sophia's voice joined his. "Danny, please, let us out so we can talk about this." But I was already walking away, the key cold in my palm, their pleas fading behind me as I climbed the basement stairs on legs that somehow still supported me, though they felt like they belonged to someone else. The world around me seemed to shift into slow motion as I emerged from the basement into the bright kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the windows, dust motes dancing in the golden beams, such an ordinary, peaceful sight that it felt obscene against the chaos raging inside me. I moved automatically through the house and out onto the dock at the back, needing space-air distance from what I had just discovered. The wooden planks were warm beneath my bare feet as I walked to the very end and sat, letting my legs dangle over the edge above the clear lake water. The betrayal crashed over me in waves. Each memory recontextualized itself in my mind. Every canceled plan, every late night at work, every time Anthony and Sophia had offered to run errands together. Had they been laughing at my ignorance all along, planning their rendezvous while sitting across from me at family dinners? I closed my eyes and was immediately assaulted by an image of my wedding day. Sophia standing beside me in her maid of honor dress, pale blue silk that complemented her eyes. Her speech at the reception had brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Anthony, today, you don't just gain a wife, you gain a sister too. Take care of her heart. It's the most precious thing in my world." The irony was so bitter I could taste it metallic and sharp on my tongue. More memories flooded in, unbidden and painful. Last Thanksgiving, when Anthony had insisted on picking Sophia up from the airport, because her flight arrived late and James was out of town. The family Christmas party, where they had both disappeared for 20 minutes, returning separately with flushed faces, they blamed on helping move heavy boxes in the garage. The joint birthday celebration for my father 2 months ago, where I'd caught them whispering in the kitchen, falling silent when I entered. How long had it been going on, years? The thought that my marriage might have been a lie from the beginning opened a pit of darkness inside me that threatened to swallow me whole. I don't know how long I sat there, minutes or hours, when I heard footsteps on the dock behind me. I tensed, preparing for a confrontation with Anthony or Sophia, somehow freed from their makeshift prison. But when I turned, it was James walking toward me, concern etched on his features. "Danielle, are you okay?" he asked, lowering himself to sit beside me. "You look pale." I stared at him, this man who had become my brother-in-law 5 years ago. James with his kind eyes and genuine laugh. James, who worked hard and loved my sister enough to support her demanding career. James, who was being betrayed just as thoroughly as I was. "Have you seen Sophia?" he continued when I didn't respond. "I woke up from my nap and can't find her anywhere. Anthony seems to be missing too." The decision crystallized in that moment, clear and sharp as glass. He deserved to know. We both deserved the truth. My hand moved to my pocket, fingers closing around my phone. "James," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "There's something I need to tell you." I led him away from the dock to a small clearing among the trees where we wouldn't be overheard by family members returning from their activities. We sat on a weathered bench my grandfather had built decades ago, facing the lake, but hidden from direct view of the house. "What's going on, Danielle? You're scaring me," James said, his brow furrowed with concern. I took a deep breath, then another, searching for words adequate to describe what I'd discovered. There were none. "I found them together." I finally said the words, falling from my lips like stones. "Anthony and Sophia, in the storage room in the basement." James stared at me, confusion clearing to comprehension, then disbelief. "Together." "What do you mean, together?" "I mean together, James, in each other's arms, whispering about how they can't keep doing this, and how hard it is to keep pretending." My voice sounded distant to my own ears, clinical, almost as if I were describing something I'd read rather than lived. "No," he shook his head, denial the first refuge. "There must be some mistake, some explanation. I saw them with my own eyes." I continued the scene, replaying vividly in my mind. "There's no mistake." James stood abruptly, pacing in front of the bench, running his hands through his hair. "How long?" he demanded. "Do you know how long this has been going on?" "I don't know for certain," I admitted. "But thinking back, there have been signs for at least 6 months, maybe longer." He stopped pacing, his face contorting with pain and anger. "Where are they now?" "Locked in the storage room," I replied. And despite everything, a small dark part of me felt satisfaction at their predicament. I turned the key and left them there. James let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. "You locked them in good. Let them stew in there." He sat back down heavily beside me. "God, Danielle, what are we going to do?" We sat in silence for a long moment, the gentle lapping of lake water against the shore the only sound. Two people united in betrayal, trying to process the unthinkable. "I think we need to confront them," I finally said. "Together." James nodded slowly, his jaw set in determination, despite the pain evident in his eyes. "Together," he agreed. As we stood to walk back to the house, my phone buzzed with text notifications. Multiple messages from Anthony sent when the storage room's spotty reception allowed. "Please let us out. We need to talk. This isn't what you think. Danielle, please. Don't do anything rash." I showed the messages to James, who read them with a bitter laugh. "Not what we think." "What exactly does he imagine we think?" We walked back to the house, a strange calm settling over me. The initial shock was giving way to a cold, clear anger. By the time we reached the basement door, I felt steadier than I had all day, fortified by James's presence beside me and the rightness of confronting their betrayal head-on. We were going to face them together, and nothing would ever be the same again. The basement felt colder than before as James and I descended the stairs. From the storage room at the far end of the hallway, we could hear muffled voices, arguing now, their earlier intimacy replaced by recriminations. "You're right," I said to James, pausing at the bottom of the stairs. "We should let them stew a little longer. Are you ready for this?" James's face was set in grim determination, though I could see the muscle twitching in his jaw. "As ready as I'll ever be." We approached the storage room slowly, deliberately. The voices grew clearer as we neared. "This is your fault," Sophia was saying, her tone accusatory. "I told you we shouldn't meet here. It was too risky." "My fault," Anthony shot back. "You're the one who texted me to meet you down here." Their blame game confirmed what I already knew. Neither was taking responsibility for their actions. They were sorry they got caught, not sorry for what they'd done. I reached the door and placed my hand on the key that still protruded from the lock. "Ready?" I asked James once more. He nodded, positioning himself beside me. I turned the key and pulled open the door. Anthony and Sophia stood at opposite ends of the storage room, now both disheveled and flushed. They squinted at the light from the hallway relief at their impending freedom, quickly morphing to dismay when they saw both James and me in the doorway. "Danielle," Anthony started, taking a step forward. "Thank God. I can explain everything." "James," Sophia exclaimed simultaneously, her hand fluttering to her throat. "This isn't— we weren't—" "Save it." James cut her off, his voice low and controlled. "We know exactly what you were doing." I crossed my arms over my chest, creating a barrier between myself and Anthony. "How long has this been going on?" Anthony and Sophia exchanged a glance, silently communicating in a way that drove another spike of pain through my heart. They even had their own private language now. "It's not what you think," Anthony tried again. "Stop saying that." I snapped, my control slipping. "I saw you with my own eyes. I heard you talking about how hard it is to keep pretending. Just tell us the truth. For once." A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Sophia spoke, her voice small. "It started about 14 months ago, at the conference in Chicago." 14 months. The number hit me like a physical blow. Nearly a third of my marriage had been a lie. "We never meant for it to happen," Anthony added quickly. "It was just supposed to be one time a mistake, but then you just kept making the same mistake over and over," James asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "For over a year. We tried to end it," Sophia pleaded, looking at James. "Multiple times, but it's complicated." "Complicated?" I echoed in disbelief. "What's complicated about not sleeping with your sister's husband?" Sophia flinched at my words. "Danny, I'm so sorry. You have to believe me. I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did anyway," I said coldly. "Every secret meeting, every lie, every time you looked me in the eye knowing what you were doing behind my back. You chose to hurt me. Both of you did." Anthony stepped toward me, his hand outstretched. "I still love you, Danielle. I was just confused." I backed away from his touch, as if it were poisonous. "Don't you dare! Don't you dare say you love me after this." James had been watching Sophia intently during this exchange. "Were you ever going to tell me, or was I just going to be the clueless husband indefinitely?" Sophia looked down at her hands. "We were trying to figure things out." "Figure what out exactly?" I demanded. "How to leave us, how to stay together, without us finding out what was the plan here." Before either could answer, we heard footsteps on the basement stairs. My mother's voice called out, "Danielle, are you down there? We're back from the boat ride." The four of us froze, the approaching interruption highlighting the absurdity of our situation. Within moments, my mother appeared in the hallway, followed by my father and Uncle David. "There you all are," she exclaimed, then paused, reading the tension in the air. "Is everything okay?" No one spoke. The silence stretched, uncomfortable and revealing. "What's going on?" my father asked, his gaze moving between us, lingering on Anthony and Sophia's rumpled appearance and the strange tableau we formed in the doorway of the storage room. Again, silence. "They were having an affair." I finally stated, the words falling like stones in still water. "Anthony and Sophia. They've been sleeping together for over a year." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's face darkened with shock and anger. Uncle David muttered something under his breath and took a step back as if trying to remove himself from the unfolding drama. "That can't be true," my mother said, looking desperately between us. "Tell me that's not true." Neither Anthony nor Sophia could meet her eyes, their silence damning. "How could you?" my father demanded, his voice thick with emotion. "Your own sister's husband. What were you thinking?" Sophia began to cry, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, I'm sorry. We never meant for this to happen." "But it did happen," I said firmly. "And it kept happening, for 14 months. The reality of the situation seemed to hit everyone at once. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a one-time mistake. This was a calculated long-term betrayal that had fractured our family irreparably. More footsteps sounded on the stairs as Rachel and her husband returned from their hike drawn by the commotion. Within minutes, the entire family was gathered in the basement hallway, the shocking revelation rippling through them like a toxic wave. I watched as people began taking sides almost immediately. My mother moved to Sophia's side, her maternal instinct to comfort overriding her disappointment. My father and uncle stood with uncomfortable rigidity, clearly disgusted, but uncertain how to proceed. Rachel put her arm around my shoulders, offering silent support. The public exposure of their affair seemed to finally break through Anthony and Sophia's defenses. The excuses stopped. They stood separately now, isolated by their actions, facing the collective judgment of our family. I turned to James. "I can't stay here," I said quietly. "Not under the same roof with them." He nodded in understanding. "I'll drive you back to Portland. I'm not staying either." We left the basement together, ignoring the calls from Anthony and Sophia to wait to talk, to listen to more explanations. Upstairs, we packed quickly and silently, gathering only what we needed for the night. The rest could be dealt with later. As we carried our bags to James's car, Anthony followed me onto the porch, grabbing my arm. "Danielle, please, don't leave like this. We need to talk." I yanked my arm from his grasp. "There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." Sophia stood in the doorway, watching us, tear tracks staining her cheeks. For a moment our eyes met. The sister I had trusted all my life, my childhood defender and confidant. I felt nothing but a vast emptiness where love had been. James started the car, and I climbed in without looking back. As we drove away from the lake house, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable but unified. Two people processing identical wounds, respecting each other's pain. The 3-hour drive back to Portland passed in a blur. Occasionally one of us would receive a text or call from family members still at the lake house, but we ignored them all. Whatever chaos was unfolding, there was no longer our concern. By the time James pulled up in front of my house, the home I had shared with Anthony, darkness had fallen, the summer evening warm and star-filled. Such beauty seemed incongruous with the devastation I felt inside. "Do you want me to come in?" James asked, his first words in over an hour. "You shouldn't be alone right now." I shook my head. "I need some space to think. But thank you." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "For everything today." He nodded, understanding. "We'll get through this, Danielle. Somehow." As I watched his taillights disappear down the street, I realized he was right. Somehow we would get through this. But nothing would ever be the same again. The weeks that followed were a blur of raw emotion and practical necessities. The night we returned from the lake house, I called Lisa, who arrived within 30 minutes with an overnight bag and a bottle of wine. She helped me change the locks the next morning, then stayed with me for 3 days as I navigated the initial shock. Anthony's calls and messages were relentless at first. "Please talk to me. I made a terrible mistake. We can work through this." I ignored them all, communicating only through the divorce attorney I hired that first week. His tone changed then from pleading to defensive, especially when he learned I wanted to sell the house. Sophia was equally persistent in trying to explain herself. She sent lengthy emails detailing how their affair had begun. We never meant for it to happen. How guilty they had felt. We tried to end it so many times. How confused they were about their feelings. "It doesn't mean I don't love you as my sister." Each message only deepened my anger and resolve to keep her out of my life. The family fractures were immediate and painful. My mother, always the peacemaker, begged me to consider forgiveness. "Families need to stick together through everything," she insisted during one tearful phone call. My father was more supportive, his straightforward Midwestern values offended by the deception. "You take all the time you need," he told me. "Some things can't be rushed." Extended family members and mutual friends chose sides. Some openly, others through quiet realignments of loyalty. Each time I lost a friend who decided to maintain relationships with both sides, it felt like another small betrayal. Through it all, I struggled to maintain my professional focus. School was out for summer, but I had commitments to the community art program I ran. Standing in front of eager students demonstrating watercolor techniques or discussing color theory, I would suddenly be overwhelmed by grief, having to excuse myself to the bathroom where I could cry in private. My students noticed the change in me. "Ms. Wallace, are you okay?" 14-year-old Zoe asked one day after class. "You seem sad." The genuine concern in her young face nearly broke me. I managed a smile and a vague explanation about going through some personal stuff, but it was becoming harder to compartmentalize my pain. During those dark weeks, art became my salvation. Late at night, when sleep eluded me, I would sit in my makeshift home studio and paint. The images that emerged were raw and chaotic, dark swirls of betrayal, jagged lines of anger, empty spaces representing loss. I wasn't creating for anyone but myself, exercising emotions too complex for words. About 3 weeks after the lake house incident, my phone rang with James's number. We hadn't spoken since that day, both needing space to process our individual griefs. "Danielle, how are you holding up?" His voice was tired but steady. "I've been better," I answered honestly. "You?" "About the same. Listen, I was wondering if you might want to grab coffee sometime. I think it might help to talk to someone who understands exactly what this feels like." The suggestion caught me off guard, but the more I considered it, the more it made sense. Who better to understand my specific pain than the person experiencing the mirror image of it? We met at a small cafe in a neighborhood far from our usual haunts, reducing the chance of running into mutual acquaintances. James looked different, thinner with dark circles under his eyes that matched my own. But he managed a genuine smile when I arrived, standing to pull out my chair. "I filed for divorce yesterday," he said after we'd exchanged awkward pleasantries. "I just couldn't see any way forward after this." I nodded in understanding. "I filed 2 weeks ago. Anthony is contesting the terms, of course. Sophia wants counseling." James shook his head in disbelief. "She actually suggested marriage counseling, as if this is something we can work through." "Anthony, too," I said, stirring my coffee absently. "He keeps saying it was just sex, and doesn't change how he feels about me." James made a disgusted noise, as if that makes it better somehow. We talked for over 2 hours, comparing notes on our separate but parallel journeys through betrayal and its aftermath. There was something uniquely comforting about speaking with someone who required no explanations, no justifications for my feelings. James understood my anger, my heartbreak, my moments of weakness when I considered answering Anthony's calls, because he was experiencing all of it too. Before we parted, he hesitated, then asked, "Can we do this again? It helps talking to you." I agreed without hesitation. Our coffee meetings became regular, once a week, then twice. We created a safe space where we could be honest about the messy process of disentangling our lives from people we had trusted completely. An unexpected friendship built on shared pain, but no less valuable for its unusual foundation. As August faded into September, a new challenge emerged. The annual extended family Thanksgiving gathering was traditionally held at my parents' home, and my mother had begun sending tentative texts about arrangements. "I know it will be difficult," she wrote, "but holidays are for family. I'm sure we can all be civil for one day." The thought of sitting across a table from Anthony and Sophia, passing dishes and making small talk, as if they hadn't destroyed my world, was unbearable. After discussing it with James during one of our coffee meetings, I made a decision. "I'm not going to Thanksgiving this year," I told my mother over the phone. "I'm sorry, but I'm just not ready for that." "But sweetheart, it's tradition," she protested. "Everyone will miss you." "I'm creating new traditions this year," I replied firmly, "and I need you to respect that." Instead of the traditional family gathering, James and I decided to volunteer at a local homeless shelter serving Thanksgiving meals, then have a quiet dinner at my apartment afterward. It wouldn't be the holiday I was used to, but it would be free from the pain of forced reconciliation. As the date approached, I felt stronger in my decision. Some wounds were too fresh for the bandage of holiday tradition. Some betrayals required more than a few months of distance to heal. I was learning to prioritize my own well-being even when it disappointed others. It was a hard lesson, but a necessary one. The path forward was unclear, obscured by the debris of broken trust and shattered expectations. But I was moving forward nonetheless, one difficult day at a time. 6 months after discovering Anthony and Sophia in the storage room, I sat across from my soon-to-be ex-husband in our attorney's office finalizing our divorce. The proceedings had been contentious, with Anthony fighting for a larger share of our assets than the prenuptial agreement allowed. In the end, his attorney advised him to accept the terms rather than risk a judge's ruling that might be less favorable given the circumstances of our separation. Anthony looked older, the stress of the past months etched in new lines around his eyes. He had lost weight, his once tailored suit hanging slightly loose on his frame. As we signed the final papers, his hand trembled slightly. "Can we talk?" he asked when we were done following me to the elevator. "Just for a few minutes. Please, Danielle." Against my better judgment, I agreed to a brief conversation in the coffee shop downstairs. We sat at a small table in the corner, two people who had once shared everything now separated by an unbridgeable chasm of betrayal. "I made the biggest mistake of my life," Anthony said, staring into his untouched coffee. "Sophia and it's over. It fell apart almost immediately after you found us." "I'm not surprised," I replied, maintaining emotional distance despite the intimacy of the conversation. Affairs rarely survive exposure. It wasn't just the exposure. Without the secrecy, without the forbidden aspect, we realized we didn't actually have much between us. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "What I had with you was real, Danielle. I threw it away for something that wasn't." I considered his words, searching for any remnant of the love I had once felt for this man. There was nothing but a hollow sadness. "That realization comes too late," I said finally. "Some things can't be repaired once they're broken." "I know." He nodded, a resigned acceptance in his expression. "I just wanted you to know that I understand what I lost. And I'm sorry. Truly sorry." As I left the coffee shop, I felt a weight lifting. Not forgiveness, I wasn't there yet and might never be, but a kind of closure. Anthony's regret changed nothing about what had happened, but acknowledging the reality of our situation allowed me to finally stop wondering if there had been something I could have done differently. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks later. I decided to keep my married name Wallace, having built my professional identity as Ms. Wallace, the art teacher. It was one small piece of continuity in a life that had been thoroughly upended. Sophia's attempts at reconciliation continued, increasingly desperate as I maintained my distance. She sent letters, flowers, even a painting she had commissioned of us as children. Each gesture was returned unopened or donated to charity. James told me she had moved back in with our parents temporarily after he sold their house, unable to afford a place of her own on her salary after the divorce settlement. She lost her job too, he mentioned during one of our regular dinners. We had graduated from coffee to occasional meals, our friendship deepening over the months. Apparently, there was a company policy about disclosing romantic relationships, and she'd been seeing one of her superiors there as well. The information should have given me satisfaction, karma catching up with my sister, but I felt only a distant sadness. The Sophia I had known and loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who had made choices I couldn't comprehend. That spring, I decided to take a sabbatical from teaching to focus on my own artwork. The emotional tumult of the past year had fueled an unexpected creative renaissance. My paintings had evolved from the chaotic expressions of raw pain to more nuanced explorations of betrayal, resilience, and rebuilding. When a local gallery owner saw my work during a community art event, she offered me a spot in an upcoming exhibition featuring artists exploring personal transformation. The opportunity to share my journey through my art was terrifying but exhilarating. I spent 3 months preparing for the exhibition, creating new pieces specifically focused on the stages of healing I had experienced. The centerpiece was a large triptych titled Aftermath, depicting 3 phases of recovery from betrayal, the initial devastation, the gradual rebuilding, and finally the emergence of a new self, different but whole. The night of the exhibition opening, James arrived early with flowers. "I wouldn't miss this," he said, embracing me briefly. "I've watched these paintings evolve from the beginning." The gallery filled quickly with art enthusiasts, colleagues from school, and friends who had stood by me through the darkest moments. To my surprise, my father appeared as well, having flown in from Arizona without telling me. "Your mother wanted to come too," he explained, "but Sophia is still staying with them. It would have been complicated." I understood. My relationship with my mother had become strained by her continued support of Sophia, her insistence that family should forgive each other anything. My father had been more respectful of my boundaries, understanding that some betrayals cut too deep for easy reconciliation. The exhibition was a success beyond my expectations. 2 pieces sold that night, and a local arts magazine requested an interview about my work. As I spoke with the journalist about the therapeutic aspects of creating during trauma, I realized how far I had come from the shell-shocked woman who had locked her husband and sister in a storage room. Afterward, I moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood, needing a fresh start, without the constant reminders of my life with Anthony. The smaller space suited my new simplicity, and I transformed half the living room into a dedicated studio where I could continue to create. Slowly, I began reconnecting with family members who had initially sided with Sophia or tried to remain neutral. My cousin Rachel visited for a weekend, bringing her children, who had always loved their Aunt Danny's art lessons. My Uncle David called regularly, his initial discomfort with the situation replaced by genuine concern for my well-being. 1 year after the lake house incident, I attended a wedding for a mutual friend where I knew Anthony would be present. I considered declining the invitation, but decided it was time to test my healing in a public setting. James offered to accompany me as moral support, and I gratefully accepted. Entering the reception venue on James's arm, I spotted Anthony immediately standing near the bar in conversation with former colleagues. He saw me too, his expression flickering through surprise, regret, and resignation. We exchanged distant nods, but didn't speak. It was enough to confirm that I could exist in the same space without falling apart, without the anger consuming me. Later that evening, another mutual friend mentioned casually that Sophia had accepted a marketing position in Seattle and would be moving the following month. The news stirred mixed emotions: relief that she would no longer be in the same city, but also a strange sadness for the final dissolution of our sisterly relationship. "Are you okay?" James asked, noticing my distraction after this revelation. "I think I am," I replied, surprising myself with the truth of it. "It's just final somehow." "The end of an era," he agreed, understanding as always. We left the wedding early, walking slowly through the warm summer evening to a nearby ice cream shop that stayed open late. Sitting on a bench outside with our cones, we talked about everything and nothing: his new promotion, my plans for a second exhibition, a film we both wanted to see. "I've been thinking about dating again," I confessed, suddenly surprising myself with the admission. Not seriously, but just being open to the possibility. James nodded thoughtfully. "That's a big step. Do you feel ready?" "I think so," I said, considering. "Not for anything intense, but maybe coffee with someone new. Dinner, normal things that people do." "Normal sounds good," he agreed. "After everything we've been through, normal is actually pretty appealing." We laughed, a genuine shared moment of lightness after so many heavy conversations. As we finished our ice cream and began walking back to where we'd parked, I reflected on how different my life looked from what I had imagined a year earlier. The future I had planned with Anthony was gone, replaced by uncertainty but also possibility. The betrayal had shattered my world, but in gathering the pieces I had created something new and entirely my own. The pain hadn't disappeared. I suspected it never would completely, but it had transformed into something I could carry without being crushed beneath its weight. Trust was still difficult. The idea of being vulnerable with someone new terrified me. But I had learned that the actions of others didn't define my worth, that betrayal was a reflection of their choices, not my value. As I unlocked the door to my apartment that night, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. The journey wasn't over. Healing rarely follows a neat linear path, but I was on my way. Not back to who I had been before, but forward to someone stronger, someone who understood her own resilience. The betrayal by my husband and sister had changed me forever. But standing in my new space, surrounded by my artwork and the life I was rebuilding, I knew with absolute certainty that it hadn't broken me. And that knowledge, hard-won and precious, was worth everything I had endured to find it. If you've ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted, I hope my story has given you some comfort in knowing you're not alone. The path to healing isn't easy, but it is possible. Have you ever had to rebuild trust after a betrayal? What helped you move forward? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you rise after they try to break you.